Welcome to the Happy Mindset, episode 161. Today's episode is called The Week I Ruined My Life. So today I'm joined by Grace Cassidy. Caroline is an Irish film and television actress. She's a screenwriter and she's an author. On today's episode, we focus primarily on her writing, her life as an author. She's writing her 8th novel, which will be published, I think, around August this year. On today's episode, we talk a little around The Week I Ruined My Life. That was one of our most recent books. We talk about writing. We talk about how Caroline knew she had a draw to be a writer. We talk a little bit around her process as a writer. How does she go about writing stories? We talk a little bit around COVID, being a writer in the COVID era, how that has affected her, and how she's seeing opportunities as well out of it. So that's today's episode. I know you'll enjoy it. Thanks again for listening, and yeah, hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks for joining us today, Caroline. It's great to have you here. So how are you today?
Yeah. Well, hi, Dennis. Well, it's great to chat to you. It's nice to meet new people and chat to new people through all this. So yeah, I'm good today. It's a very wet and rainy Sunday here at the foothill of the Dublin Mountains, but apart from that,
yeah. So yeah, how are you finding the pandemic at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I have very different levels of pandemic feelings. I suppose the very first one was sort of fine. I embraced it, and I was actually just finishing a novel that I was due to deliver in a couple of months. So it was good. I had loads of time to do it, and loads of family time. Lockdown 2, I was just a bit like, oh, okay. Glad I don't have to write something new yet, because I need interaction with people. I need, to sort of observe people in coffee shops or stand at arrivals in Dublin Airport and watch what's going on. So that's how I write a lot. So that was hard. And then this one, 3, I found very hard, I have to say. I'm lucky now that I was editing a novel, I suppose. So it was kind of pretty much done. So that's was actually due to be published in May, and we've pushed it back to August because any of my friends that I know that have books out at the moment, they're not selling. I mean, they're saying bookshops are open, but it's not the same. Like a lot of book trade is done by, you're going to Marks and Spencer's to buy whatever, and you happen to go into Easton's and you happen to see that book. And, so that's how a lot of books are sold. So that's not, books aren't really selling at the moment. So it's a difficult time, I think, to be a sort of commercial fiction writer right now.
How do you find it? How do you find that change in circumstance and environment? How do you handle that on on a mental and emotional level? How are you finding that?
Do you mean within work?
Yeah, as in adapting to realizing this is a situation right now and you don't know exactly when that's going to end either. How do you deal with that when it's your work that's on the line?
Yeah. I mean, it is difficult, and even the book that I'd already started, that's out now, was set pre-COVID by a month, really, but I managed to sort of keep COVID out of the book. But I find it very hard to think about what I'm going to write about next. Within this world, I wrote an article for the Daily Mail yesterday, and I was saying the exact same things in it. You're starting at the beginning of this, you're like, when it ends, and now it's like, when will it end, and is it going to end? And I think all those questions are there now, which probably weren't there so much in the beginning. You just kind of felt that it would end, I suppose. So a year later, so yeah, I'm not going to kill myself creatively to find my space, I suppose, within the COVID world of writing a book. So I'm just going to let it sort of linger for a while before I am due to deliver a book in September. But I'm just going to let it linger for a little while and see, because the sort of stuff I write is mainly commercial fiction, and I like to be able to put characters in situations, and COVID stops you from doing that, because if you're writing a book that's set in present time, 2 characters can't meet in a lift and kiss. Do you know what I mean?
How did you find yourself within that genre? Was that something you were always observing in the world, or how do you find yourself in this genre of writing?
Well, I suppose, like, I never did a writing course, or I never, I didn't study writing in college. I studied broadcasting journalism. But I suppose I was a reader, from the age of 4 or 5, I read. I just loved reading. And sort of commercial fiction when I was growing up would be, you'd have a Marion Keyes book out once a year and you would literally go in, you'd be going in all the time, looking at the shelves to see when the new Marion Keyes was out, or, Patricia Scanlon, City Girls, they all really inspired me to sort of, and I suppose not so much inspired me, but they taught me how to write. Like I literally learned the pattern of how to write a novel from reading a novel. That's just how I did it. And I suppose that genre in particular, because I think you have to enjoy writing. I know you get to a certain stage and it's a slog, but for the most part, I think you have to love your characters and really want to be with them and put them into situations. And I think writers like Marion Keyes and Patricia Scanlon and those kind of writers, Irish writers, really helped me learn how to write, I suppose.
So when did you realize you could write a story, that you were capable of doing that?
No one's ever asked me that. I suppose there's a funny story I have that I was expecting my first child and I had been an actress. That was what my main job was. But even if a role wants a pregnant actress, they will get an actress who's not pregnant and make her wear a prosthetic bump, right? So there's no roles for pregnant women. And I'd always wanted to try to write a novel, but I'd never, I was too busy going on auditions and, you're learning lines and you're doing this, that, and the other. Anyway, I was at home one day, quite heavily pregnant, and there was a competition on TV3. I think it was Write a Bestseller. It was a program called The Morning Show. And anyway, I just said, I'll try it, I'll give it a whirl. But then my husband was going out to work one day and he's like, well, what are you going to do today or whatever? And I said, I'm going to write a book. And he's like, but like, do you not need like Post-its up or, like some kind of, because I'm not a plotter. I just write and it just evolves. And kind of just to show him, I think I just said, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to try it. And I just sat down and I just wrote the first book, When Love Takes Over, in about 6 weeks. I make it all up as I go along. I don't know who the characters are, what's going to happen. I have no plot. Sometimes I have a bit of an ending, a line might come into my head. But so I suppose to answer your question, when I finished that book was the first time I thought, oh, I can do it. I don't know if anyone's going to publish it, but I can write it.
What does that process look like for you? Are you going from start to finish? And how are you structuring that? Like, so your thoughts are coming into your head, you're writing stuff down, the characters are coming to you. But how do you actually organize that practically? Is there a process behind that?
No, it's funny, and I know most writers will have a structure, a plot, and know where they're going. I will normally sit down and put somebody into a situation. So I will just say, Dennis popped up on screen, sitting behind the microphone, and then I'll just continue to write, and the story just comes as I write. I don't know how or why it happens, but I mean, obviously there's, I would have a big folder of 20,000 words or 30,000 words of books that just didn't, that I had to stop, like it wasn't going anywhere. But I'm about to publish my 8th novel this summer, and that's been my process the whole way through. I just sit down and start to write, and then they just come to me as I go.
And are they generally that condensed a time frame, like 6 weeks will take you to write each book, or do they vary the length of time you've spent in each book?
Depends. It's kind of been one on, one off. One, like the first one was kind of easy, the second one can be harder. It sort of depends, but no more than 3 months really to sort of get my first draft down. I think that's the sort of the longest I've ever spent. I mean, some come harder. Like I think my 3rd book, because I ended up signing a 3-book deal, and like I wrote 1 book. I didn't know if I was ever going to be able to write another one. Yeah. And the second one was kind of okay, but the 3rd one on that contract was a slog, because it was a book a year, and I found that difficult. So I did find that book was called Already Taken, and it went quite dark, and it wasn't really me, but I think I was trying something else, just because the sort of the comedy and the lightness wasn't really coming, as it had in the first 2.
Actually, with how do you feel there when you're going a bit more darker and experimenting with it? How do you feel that out for yourself? How do you start going there to a darker place if you're used to more comedic and lightness?
I suppose the first one that was dark was this third book already taken, and I think I just wanted to try something darker, I suppose, and just give the characters, you know, this book in particular, the lead character was a real loner. You know, she was very isolated and sort of very unhappy, but I didn't enjoy the write. Do you know what I mean? Like I kind of had to really pull it, and I think it taught me that it's not my forte. I think, you know, I mean, we'll talk about The Week I Ruined My Life in a minute, because I know you've read that, and that started out what I was going to, that sort of started out as a marriage that was falling apart, but that got better and had a happily ever after. And then as I was writing it, the characters, it just wouldn't let me physically. It wasn't going the way I wanted to go. And I just got dragged down this sort of very dark hole of a marriage in real crisis, and ending with a woman walking away from her children, which wasn't where I was going at all. But sometimes I think you just have to, if it feels right, you just have to go with it and sort of see where it takes you.
Yeah, you're following your gut in that, are you? How do you know what way it's going there? Are you following your gut and things, is it?
I think you're following your gut. Yeah, I think, you know, in that book in particular, I was going to send the two girls off on a holiday, and, you know, there was going to be all this sort of fun stuff, and then I ended up, you know, turning it into this almost affair that, you know, was very dark and it got quite violent. So I suppose, yeah, I think I literally did just follow my instinct that no, that there's more to this, and it's not going to be the happy end ever after. And I suppose when it was I had just signed a new book deal with an English publishers, and I was nervous because they were expecting, you know, the sort of easy breezy romantic comedy. So I was kind of off my own beaten track on that, but I was lucky that they really liked it. I mean, there was one character in there, Karina, who was light relief through it all. But yeah, I think I did just follow my gut and see what happened. And I mean, it could have completely backfired and people hated it, but it turned out people really liked it. So that was good.
Would that help you with dealing with the unknown? Because you seem to have started out with a different premise, but then you end up with a different story. Like in general life, like with the pandemic right now, you feel that on some level that helps you deal with uncertainty and on the unknown when you're willing to go a place that you didn't think you were originally going to go to.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really freeing, you know, and I think that's why I'm not a plotter, because I think my better stuff, my better ideas come when I'm just, I mean, sometimes it's like a piano. I don't play piano, but I'm sure, you know, that's how you kind of write songs, is you just let your fingers go wherever they want to go. So yeah, I do think that you have to be free and just, you know, not be rigidly stuck to your storyline. Well, me, like, if it works for you, brilliant, but it doesn't work for me. So I think, you know, if I just stuck to my kind of idea as I was going in The Week I Ruined My Life, it would have been totally different. And I'm glad it wasn't, because it was an important book to write. And, you know, the amount of messages I got from women in really dark places and you know, awful marriages, that said the book really helped them, you know. So I mean, that's always what you want as a writer, you know.
Yeah, no, I can see that, because like the way it ended, it felt like it made it normal that things don't always end in a surface level happy way, and things can happen for a reason that guides you in a direction that might be quite difficult to go in, but it can actually help you to find that path you've wanted to go on. That's kind of what I got from the ending of it.
And then that's exactly it. Yeah, I mean, that was, you know, there's so many people do things because you're told that they're the right things to do, you know, and sometimes they're not the right things to do. Yes, they're more morally acceptable, you're pleasing other people, but, you know, sometimes I think you do have to take ownership of your own happiness. And I mean, nobody wants to intentionally hurt, you know, anybody else, but you also don't want to live a life that's a lie.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose the other thing I got from the book, I don't want to be giving away too much, but just my interpretation of the Owen O'Neill character, it felt like she was drawn to him because he embodied the repressed aspects of herself, as in she wanted to be more artistic, and she wanted to accept that, I guess, in herself, because she lived with a husband who didn't see that as important. So with that type of character, is that something you intentionally think about beforehand, or is it naturally, it just kind of happens in hindsight, you kind of see that this character represents something to this person?
Kind of in hindsight, I suppose, if I'm honest, but I think I like to write characters who are entitled to change, who are entitled to say, okay, I didn't like abstract painting last year, but I like it this year. And I think people are pigeonholed a lot of the time and saying, so your point is interesting when you look at someone who is living a life that you would like to live, that you're putting that mirror up and saying, God, wouldn't that be great? So I suppose Ali's attraction to Owen was, a sort of the freedom, the nomadic lifestyle, and it started to sort of open something in her head that told her, I am desperately unhappy, but I haven't really acknowledged the fact that I'm really unhappy because I'm just ticking along. And, the whole reason I made her husband so, and somebody really likes if you really like something and somebody else really doesn't like it, it's kind of okay, right? But you have to respect the fact that the other person likes that,
Yeah.
So I think he was so dismissive of theater and the arts, and there's a lot of people out there who think theater is a waste of time, and that's fine, but she doesn't. And so I think what I wanted was for people to read it, and like you're saying, women, I mean, when I say people, to hold that mirror up and say, are you getting enough sort of respect from your marriage or relationship? The things that you love to do, are they being respected, I suppose? And yeah, you're right in saying that Owen was that sort of mirror held up to her, that he was everything, I suppose, that she wanted to be herself, while also being everything that her husband wasn't.
Yeah, and I think it also represented it was quite one-dimensional. I think she realized that, as in he just represented the aspects that she was drawn to, but it wasn't, if you look at it, he wasn't representing that stability in that marriage. He wasn't representing all the things in her life, but she was just fixated on the things that her husband wasn't. So I think it dawned on her because she didn't go after him afterwards when the marriage ended.
Exactly. I think, what I was trying to say there is nobody's going to fix your problems. No person is going to fix your problems. No man, no woman, no whatever. You have to do that for yourself, So yes, he was the catalyst that, probably, she was wanting to be sort of caught, not that she did have the affair in the end, but I think, he was just that sort of door to sort of push open and be able to escape through, I suppose.
Yeah, give herself permission. Sometimes it is easier to give yourself permission by proxy from somebody else that it's not actually you, but it's leading you in the direction you want to go in, but you're not giving yourself the permission to go there. You need that other person to give it to.
I mean, I think Ireland, especially, and marriage in Ireland, it's, like if you're in the States, people actually refer to your marriage as your first marriage, your second marriage, your third marriage. And I think here we're so conditioned to try desperately to make marriages work. They shouldn't be that hard, it really shouldn't. So I think, from a lot of the messages that I got from women, reading that book was, God, I would love to get out of this marriage, but I have children. But, so there's all this, and, I push the boundaries harshly by, Ali actually leaving, because most women can't physically do that, and by physically, I mean emotionally, and, they just wouldn't be able to be apart from their children like that. But that's not to say you still won't be a brilliant mother if you live across the road, you live somewhere else. I think in Ireland, when marriages break up, it's normally the man, rightly or wrongly, and I know lots of cases that it's completely wrongly, that have to sort of leave the home. So I was trying to sort of look at that as well and think, there are other ways to be parents without, the typical Irish route of, well, the marriage doesn't work and he has to move out, and there's this, that, and the other, and all the financial complications, or the kids are in school up the road and you're moving them away, and trying to be the best for everybody, I suppose. And the reason why Ali felt it was better to leave was, the kids weren't being as uprooted, or moved around as much as had she sort of taken them and gone somewhere else. And then the reality of her trying to work and do it. And so there's all those kind of things that I just wanted to poke a stick at, I suppose.
Yeah, no, I liked it. Like, even giving it 6 months gap between the last two chapters.
Yeah.
For me, that kind of represented that these things take time. There's no quick fix here because there's a lot of stuff to work through on an emotional and intellectual level. And I think by giving it time, you come to a better resolution. Like it seemed from the book too that like her and her husband didn't come to a stage where they couldn't get on with each other anymore. The door was still open for them to become friends in time. That was also quite good. They weren't friends straight away, but the door was open potentially with the tease that they were having and stuff. But potentially in a few years' time, they might come to friendly terms again. There was a maturity there that you can break apart. And,
totally. And I think even, Colin being he was a little bit caricatured in a way, but he was representing a lot of men in marriages that I've seen, that I've witnessed, I suppose. Not a bad man at all. There was, at the, a scene in it where he thinks having an affair and he punches the head off some guy. I don't think that's him. I think that's kind of what you'd expect. You know what I mean? I don't think there was, somebody said he was very violent. Well, he wasn't violent. He was just violent on that occasion. And, he was a great provider and a great father. But what he was unwilling to do was watch his wife grow and change and accept that, and like I say, like I've never had as many messages from a book from people as I had, of that book. And the amount of them said, counseling, we've tried it and we get out of the room and they just laugh, and that's why near the end of the book, they do go for marriage counseling and they do try and they sit there and it's gone. Sometimes it is just gone. And I would hope that, like you say, the reader is left with that idea that, they will be friends, they will be okay and they'll be able to do things with the kids and whatever else, that was my sort of my hope.
No, it was good. Yeah, it definitely opened doors for different realities, different types of paths you can go down. And I suppose even with the counselling that they went there, and that's where they realised that there was nothing. And they both realised that it was on a feeling level. They weren't convincing themselves of anything. It was just like they realised that it's come to its natural conclusion, and there's no right or wrong to this. It's just the way things are. I guess when you have somebody who isn't willing to grow and the other person who's growing, it has to come to some sort of resolution eventually.
And it's sad, of course it's sad, but it doesn't mean that you failed at the marriage. It just means that I just think it means more that you tried, you really, really tried. And, again, I'm saying it's very Irish that, we think we've really failed if a marriage doesn't work. And I just don't think that's the truth. I think nobody goes into a marriage thinking, in Ireland, thinking, hope this lasts a good 10 years, whatever. We all go into marriage here thinking, this is for life, most of us. So, when they don't work out and when these things happen, it's tragic, and especially when there's kids involved, it's really, really tough. But what I wanted, the outcome of that book is that it's also okay. It's okay if it doesn't work out. There's the amount of people stuck in really horrible, loveless, soulless marriages because they think, the sake of the children, I'll stay. They think, well, financially, I can't take the children out, or I haven't got the money for that. So what I was trying to say is there's other ways, there is other ways to dissolve a marriage and still everybody is kind of okay. It doesn't need to be this massive catastrophe, and because people change. And that was kind of my whole idea of Ali Devlin, was this young woman, and actually I've explained it in, it's been pitched as a TV series at the moment. It's RT, but we've kind of explained it as what would have happened to Connell and Marianne in Normal People had they got married and had kids, because it's that Ali and Colin fell in love in school, and people change, and the lucky marriages are when people do change together and you sort of evolve together. But a lot of the time when you're married very young and you've kids very young, and women especially, I think, women in this country, aren't really allowed to change their minds. So, Ali had, can't want to have kids and be a stay-at-home mom. And then you do that and your first kid goes off to school and you're like, what do I do now,
Yeah.
And, so you have to have that right to say, okay, now I want to go and be a mechanic. Now I want to make clocks. Now I want to do whatever, and not feel that you've cheated the person you've married, or you've hidden something on them, or you've lied about who you were in the past. That's not true. You've simply evolved.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's something that's quite difficult in the culture, is just this acknowledgement that we evolve and change as people, because it is they did meet when they were teenagers, and teenagers you don't know who the hell you are. You just know what society tells you or who you should be. Like a lot of people, unless you're got maturity at that age, I don't know. But there has to be a level of allowing people to grow. And then when people grow, things change. And then often with change comes a bit of turmoil, like we're seeing right now. There's stuff going on that we'd rather not face, but that's part of the growth. It's the discomfort part of it that you need to go through to get to the growth. And I think
Well,
there's
even
not a lot of
talking,
room for that.
yeah, but even you just pointing that out, and I'll get off marriages now, but can you imagine like the amount of very hard marriages at the moment, like during these times, with couples who are just literally thrown together 24/7 and they've nowhere else to go. And I do think we'll come out of this and see a
Yeah,
lot of broken marriages after this,
yeah.
and again it's because time spent together and personalities revealed that are kind of maybe not, there's not that time, or that sort of the energies are very different, I suppose, when the world was normal.
It's also hard to communicate with resentment. I think that was kind of the big thing I saw in the book, was that on both sides they started to resent each other because they didn't really feel like they understood each other, and then they were just kind of at loggerheads, so they never really see each other's point of view and why they were really acting the way they were acting. Uh,
Yeah.
I find that quite challenging when you're not acknowledging the resentment and acknowledging the miscommunication. These things kind of they become more intense than they need to be, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's so much resentment in that novel, and again, like you say, it's because I think it's because these two children basically, got married, and they decided very early on what their lives were going to be, and then both ended up resenting what the other sort of turned into, I suppose. Like Ali, resented Colin's, unwillingness to sort of to support her, I suppose, in what she now wanted to do in her life, to change. And a lot of that was fear. He was fearful that shit, she'll meet someone else, or why isn't she at home when I'm home? There's a lot of fear factor, I think, in a lot of resentment. There can be a lot of fear. But yeah, for sure, I think during COVID and during this lockdown, I think resentment will be will really rear its ugly head in lots of different ways. I mean, even myself, my eldest daughter now has been online school for the last since December or since January. And so you're in the house like all day long, whereas in the last sort of middle lockdown, we're all out, and she's on my MacBook. But you're just kind of seeing other people going back to work and everything. You're like, I want to go back to work, I want to do this, or I want, so there is, I think we all have a little bit of resentment about what we all perceive that everybody else is doing. I suppose we're all just swimming around in this same fishbowl, really.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
What's the turning the book into an 8-part series? What's that process like?
Yeah, it's been great. So I've been working with a film director in England called Virginia Gilbert. So we've adapted it together. So it is a 8-part series. Sorry, I think I said 6. So it goes from the week events, I suppose, up until the last episode 8 will be sort of a wrap up. So yeah, it's kind of it's been really interesting. I mean, I've written a few screenplays, so I kind of know my way around it a bit, but that's sort of, we sort of pitched it, like I was saying, sort of normal people, but the reverse of it. So yeah, the only problem with writing a TV episodic now that is only 8 parts is nobody wants only 8 parts now. Everyone wants, more and more and more. So the streamers, you can't even go to the streamers really with an 8-part. They want you to do more. And the thing about Ali was I want to finish her story there. I think that's the ending is the ending, so don't want to, oh, this is what happened then when she moved into her flat. So that's been kind of difficult. But no, it's been a really interesting journey, and we sort of changed aspects of it. We brought there's more of the children, I suppose, in the TV show than there is in the book, and the sort of relationship with mother and daughter especially is a bit more focused on in the TV series.
So I guess, yeah, it gives you an opportunity to expand on and explore other aspects that you didn't explore in the book. Is that what the series gives you
Yeah.
as well?
Yeah, totally. I mean, the premise obviously will always remain the same. It's sort of,
Mm.
Kramer versus Kramer did this in, the 70s, where Meryl Streep walked out on Dustin Hoffman and the child, but she came back, so we're very adamant that there's not going to be sort of that Ali will go and will stay gone, and Colin will be the main provider for the children, but she will still be a really good mother, so it's trying to get away from that definition of a great mother is someone who knits and sews and stays home and cooks and does all those kind of things. No, that's not, a great mother is a happy woman first and foremost.
Yeah. I think that's it. It's vital to be happy in yourself first, because you can't give what you don't have, and that's the vital component, I think.
Exactly. I think what people forget who want to make this model motherhood is your children are watching you. And you're putting this, if it's fake, and you're putting this fake life out to the children who are watching. I mean, I know most children would just much rather have a happy mother than a mother who is, like I said, baking, cooking, knitting, doing whatever else all day long, but is internally, putting on an act. You don't want to children to sort of think, oh, well, I have to do the same because my mother did that all the time. So I think it's important that as women, we say the most important thing for a mother is to be happy.
Yeah. I think it's also I suppose just not copying what you think happiness looks like, because one mother could love that. They might like baking and being in the household and being a housewife. Another woman might feel that's hell and they'd actually rather something else. So it's really
exactly,
like questioning
yes.
that for yourself.
So right, Dennis. So what we need to do is show different aspects. It's the same thing that's being shown. So yes, if you love baking and do that, brilliant. But there's a mom over there who's out the back gardening all day and she doesn't, but she's, so I just think because we're bombarded with the same image of what mothers look like or what mothers should look like. And I think that narrative has to change.
Yeah, the narrative. Actually, back to your own life again, what I'm curious about is because you were an actress before you were a writer. Why was that?
Well, like I said, I did study broadcasting journalism in Ballyfermot, out in Senior College Ballyfermot, and I don't know. I mean, school, I only really loved English. I wasn't. I was a grand student, I suppose you'd say. I was a bit of a messer, but English I loved. Like when we did Shakespeare, like we did Romeo and Juliet, and we did Othello, and then we did Silas Marner, and we just these books that I loved. So I suppose I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I just knew that I wanted to do something creative. So the broadcasting journalism thing it just sort of gave me options, because there was radio, there was print, there was TV, there was all these other things. And probably the very first story I wrote in Ballyfermot, we had to do this travelogue story, but I, for some reason, wrote it in the first person, where everyone else would have written it just like, the tree in the hill is lovely. And I said, Sarah climbed the hill and da-da-da. Anyway, so I got top marks and there was a prize for it or whatever. And I remember the teacher saying, God, you should write stories. Like that was a really, really good story. And then the acting thing, we had this little TV setup studio in Ballyfermot, and we used to just do these little plays, like just for fun or whatever. And I just really liked it. And out of that, then I did a night course in the Gaiety School of Acting, and they were looking for extras to be in this. It was actually an opera, believe it or not. Can't remember what it was called now, but anyway, that was in the Gaiety. And being in the theatre backstage for the first time, I was like, wow, I really like this. Like, I just love the vibe. So then I went to Inchicore and studied for 3 years there. And out of that, met this theatre director called Michael Scott, who had taken over the SFX in town. It was this old music venue, but he turned it into a theatre, and we put on loads of plays there. And then I was asked to audition for Custer's Last Stand-Up, which was a children's TV show on BBC and RTE. So it was quite, it was a big deal, and I got the part, and we filmed out in Ardmore, and I don't know, I sort of learned on the job as I went. I wouldn't say I was ever the best, most amazing actress in the world, but I wasn't okay and I enjoyed it, but I found the auditioning process hard. I'm a way better actor on the floor than I am an auditioner. It's the sense of, will they like me, that I found really difficult. And, I'd say I ruined more auditions than did well in, just because, it was that sense of wanting to please people, I think, that I didn't like. But if you put me on the floor, you put me on a set, I was grand, but it was the auditioning process that I didn't like. But anyway, I did a few. I did a big Hollywood film up in Belfast with David Gordon Green and James Franco and Natalie Portman, Call Your Highness. And it was funny. We auditioned in Belfast for this. And on the way up to the audition, there was a bomb on the train line. So we all had to get off the train. I was so stressed by the time I got to the audition room that I just went, come on, because I was going to be late to get the train back. And anyway, I ended up doing the best audition of my life, because there was no nerves. I didn't care. I was just like, get me out of here, get me home, and got it. So, yeah, but it was never something I think that I was ever going to want to go to LA. I was never really, that pushed. I mean, I have so many friends now who are still actors, and Jesus, it's a tough gig. It's a really, really, it's a tough life. And I suppose, like I was saying, then when I got pregnant, then I couldn't really audition. So that's when the sort of the writing stuck. But just to go back to that, when I won that 3-book deal, it was with Poolbeg Press, and I was like, oh my God, and then you look at the contracts and you look at the money and you're like, oh, okay, I gotta keep other money coming in. I think this is the thing people don't realize, is that most authors get paid shit. The money's really, really bad.
Yeah, I think you have to really love what you're doing to be an author.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like, I could never have worked in office, or, I'm not great at people telling me what to do. And so, I thank my lucky stars that I do this for a living now. Thankfully I get paid better now, but that, I can sit down and all I need is this laptop and I can go and create a piece of art that will live forever. I think that's, I know I'm really lucky to do that, because I have so many friends who write brilliant books and they can't get published at all. So I'm not poo-pooing it, but I'm just saying it isn't your 3-book deal isn't, you're not going out buying your Merc,
Yeah. Set realistic expectations. I think, I suppose when you get into it for the right reasons, those things don't deter you anyway. Because you're going to keep going regardless anyway.
Well, that's it. But I also think if there's anything that all this lockdown has taught us, it's, books, film, how important they've been. Because when we're stuck in our houses like this, that's the only escapism you really do get. So, I do really feel for a lot of actor friends who haven't been able to work in a year. Theatres haven't been open for a year, and that's really, really hard on those people, because that's their jobs. And like you say, it's also it's part of them. It's what they need to do as well as what they want to do.
Yeah, that must be difficult to write when it's contextually based. Like, a writer can write anywhere, but an actor needs to act in front of people or be on a set or something.
Well, even if you're lucky enough to be a film actor, or TV, that's kind of rolling on. We have a huge community of just theatre actors here. Every night of the week, we've the Abbey, the Peacock, the Project, the New Theatre, the Gate. These are full every night with actors who work, and and it's just like you've pulled the rug completely from under their feet, and there's nothing else that they can do. Oh, put on a play and put it online. Oh, shut up. That's not how it works. You need a live. They feed. Actors are like bears. They feed off
the energy. Yeah.
They feed off laughter and they feed off audience, and it's not the same. I mean, I watched a play in the Abbey online just to support, but you're just like, we're all sick of being online, and that's not escapism, I suppose.
The other thing, actually, do you find your work has helped you with your people-pleasing aspect to overcome that in any way?
How do you mean?
As in, like, you're putting work, like, I suppose even for how I ruined my life in a week, because you're putting something out there that isn't conventional. I'm guessing you can't be a people-pleaser to do that. It goes against your nature to people-please to do that.
Yeah. Sorry. So, I mean, I think like even the book that I've written now is it's a very long title. It's called The Unexpected Love Story of Lexi Byrne, age 39 and a half. And again, it's looking at sort of when women hit 40, this baby, panic, settle, grab, man, go. And again, that's ingrained in us, but it's also a physicality that, you know, our body clocks are sort of stopping making babies sort of around that age. But, you know, this sort of settling thing that I've seen go on a lot, that, you know, you get to this certain age and you just settle. So, you know, when you talk about people pleasing or not, so I've kind of rocked the boat in this novel a little bit where she's just like, we're expected to have babies, right? You know, that's what women do. That's how the world will continue to grow. But she sort of pushes back against that, and she's like, she just isn't sort of ever going to settle for anybody, and, you know, wants to find this true love. And does true love exist? Well, you don't know unless you really, 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 really look for it, you know. And how do you look for it? How do you know that? You got to date a lot of people. You know, you've got to. So, you know, I don't know whether this novel will be what people will expect from me, I suppose, but I found it quite. I find it very interesting to write a character who is a woman and who isn't panicking because she's 40 and who isn't desperate to procreate, and, you know, who's just living her life, kind of like a guy who's 39 and a half lives his life. But yeah, so I'm not sure that she's as pleasing to my audience as maybe some of my other characters, you know, because she's very strong.
Actually, the what came to mind there was about the expecting your audience expecting something. Do you feel like that could stifle you after a while if you're writing with their expectations in mind, and you also think they might get bored of you after a while if they can predict what they're going to read? Why would they read the book?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because as well, a lot of the time publishers will try and keep pushing you into their comfort zone. You know, I suppose what they know will sell. And, you know, a Caroline Grace Cassidy novel is commercial fiction. There'll be a heroine, there'll be a bit of a love story. So I don't worry personally about my audience not liking it. I just think, you know, I don't really like to pigeonhole what I write. I just write stories, I suppose. So not every story is going to please sort of everybody. You know, there's another Irish writer called Ciara Geraghty, and she's sort of the same. She started off writing kind of upbeat commercial fiction, and she sort of changed it into this sort of darker, very wordy, prosy kind of books. And her audience have just grown with her. You know, they've sort of just gone with that's what she's doing. So, you know, I'd never worry, I suppose, that they're not going to sell because because the audience don't like it. I'll just keep writing what. The only way I know how is what comes out, basically. You know, yes, yeah. I could sit down and totally totally, okay, I'm going to write this story about this girl on a beach or whatever, but it would be, I think you'd see through it immediately because the characters wouldn't be there, you know.
They wouldn't be life to them, yeah.
Yeah.
Authentic. But I suppose it also gives you a space to grow as a writer yourself when there isn't that fixed genre, that it gives you space to grow as a writer, and over time you'll be open to experimentation, and I suppose it's also that things will happen in your life that you mightn't expect, and then that will also put your focusing in a different direction. But if you're not open to that, then it won't come true in the writing.
No, I mean, it's like that, you know, if you're a Liz Nugent or somebody and you write these horror books or, you know, murder books. I mean, that's, people know if you buy Liz Nugent, someone's going to get killed in the book. But I think that's the beauty of my writing, is you don't really know what to expect. You know, there's going to be a story told, but because some of, like, as I say, this is number 8, and probably 3 of those have been quite different, and the new one is quite different, that I think people are willing to just go on the journey and just not really know what to expect. And it's sort of, you can get very pigeonholed as a writer, obviously, because of your publishers, because they know what sells. So sometimes if it isn't marketable, they'll try and push you down and down another avenue. But the way I write, like I was saying, is I just sit down and start, and the story just comes. So most of the time I can't preempt whether it's going to be a happy or sad ending, do you know?
Yeah, well, actually, what comes to mind for me there is that you mentioned at the start that COVID or the pandemic's difficult for you because you write based on the current day, the context, your observations. But I guess an opportunity is that when things do kind of resume in some way, society could experience a big shift in how we go about things, which will give you new material, and you'll probably write books that are quite different to what you're doing, yet still stick to the same uh, genre of what you're doing,
Mhm.
but they could be very different because the society has changed quite a lot in a very condensed period of time.
Well, totally. Yeah. Like we were chatting before you were taping, is that, when the kids are in school, normally I'll get on a bus and I'll just listen to conversations. And so they're going to be dramatically changed. Those kind of, I think there'll be a more serious tone in the world. I think
Yeah.
there might be a more grateful, people will be more grateful, I think, and more, I think people more willing to get out now and to sort of do more things and push themselves a little bit more. So it'll be interesting to observe what's going on in cafes and that kind of stuff, and see where that takes the writing. So I'll only hope it's sooner rather than later that we can get to do that.
Yeah. No, that's good. I think that's pretty much it today. I covered a lot of ground there.
The thing is, I think for writers, if you're only starting to write, I think now is a really exciting time to start to write. I think I'm sort of used to how I write, so it's difficult to start. But I think starting now, you have a really new and fresh canvas that no other writers had before in the history of the world. You know what I mean? You're writing about the world now and how people are feeling, and I think there's a really exciting opportunity there, I think, for first time writers to sort of find their voice. I think the ship is sailed for me in that level, because I'm too attuned to how I write and to how I watch the world and how I see people. But I think if you're only starting out now, you have a really interesting voice for people to read and to see how you see the world now.
So do you have any tips actually for somebody finding their voice as a writer?
I suppose everybody, I have a lot of writer friends, and everybody writes very differently. And like I said earlier, I don't plot. And I would advise any writer who thinks, oh, I think I have a book, I just don't know how to do it, to try and do what I do, which is just to sit down and write and, see what comes out. Because I think sometimes writers get really bogged down in beginning, middle, end, to have it all down, when really you should just trust yourself and just see what happens and where it goes. And obviously it's no harm to have some kind of loose plot, but I certainly think it's what holds a lot of writers back, is that they don't think they have it all in their head, or it's not all set in concrete. They don't trust their creative side of their brain, because what happens is, as characters evolve, the story evolves naturally, so you can just put just have your characters, just come up with your characters, and then literally, like I said, sit down and put them in, drop them in anywhere, put them sitting on a bed reading a book, and your brain will naturally tell you, oh, someone came in the door, who's that, what happens next? And I just think a lot of writers don't trust themselves enough in that part.
Yeah, I feel that it's the trust in yourself in general, because it's quite an intimate thing that you're doing, and you could also seek feedback from the wrong person, I think, and then you'd second guess yourself and doubt yourself. Do you have any advice around that, where you don't have confidence in how you see the world, because it is like your perception of the world that you're dealing with here also?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I never let anybody read my stuff until I send it to the publishers. I think there can be too many voices. And like you said, I think it's your story. You have to trust yourself to write it. And obviously you're putting yourself out there, for whatever you write, everyone's going to read and everyone's going to have an opinion or a comment or whatever on it. But I just find you're way better off finishing your draft, and then if you want to look for feedback. But when you start sending it around, people say, oh, well, I didn't think this, and I didn't think that. Everybody has a totally different opinion. This is your story. You know how to write it. You're going to write it. So I just think, I know loads of people who send it. They've all these friends who read it first and give various feedback and all. I just think it slows the process down,
But
And the other tip I would give, which is
yeah,
how I always write, is write your first 3 chapters. Don't think you're writing a book. Think you're writing, because most publishers will ask, or if you're looking for an agent, they'll just ask you for the first 3 chapters. And that's an easy thing to write, you know. I mean, a chapter can be 4 pages, a chapter can be 14 pages, you know, so there's no definition on how long a chapter should be. But I think if you get your first 3 chapters down and go over them, a lot of the time what happens then is you start to see, oh yeah, I can. So I think that's a tool that enough budding authors don't use. They think they have to delve in and write the whole book, when I think you really only need to write your first 3 chapters, and then you have a great, like, you're up and running.
Well, that's a good idea. It's even testing the waters with those 3 chapters. You could
Well, it
do
is,
another
you
one
know,
if you want
and
to.
they're the most important chapters of any book, are the first 3 chapters, because readers literally keep going or put down after the first 3 chapters. A publisher will only read the first 3 chapters. It doesn't matter if you've got the whole book written, most of the time that's what they'll read, and then it'll go on to somebody else. And it feels way more doable, you know, 3 chapters than 100,000 words. So that's how I started with everything. And once I get those 3 chapters down, I'll go over them. And suddenly those 3 chapters, for me, a lot of the time, become 7 chapters, become 8 chapters, because I keep adding to them, so it's like, you know, they're like seeds. And then, you know, you're just watering them, and it just grows and grows and grows. So that's my biggest tip, I think, for any budding writer, is to write your first 3 chapters and then go from there.
Actually, when you're writing the book, do you feel yourself living in this world when you're writing it?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you do. Yeah. I mean, you know, there's times where I would think, geez, I wonder how Mia is. And I go, oh my God, you made her up. Like, she doesn't exist, you lunatic. Or I'll think about a house that I've sort of created in my head and go, I love that house. So yeah, that happens a lot. Like I mean, I suppose now this is 8 books. So I've written probably 8 main female you know, female characters in my books, and you would know them personally, you know, down to what they wear, to what they eat, to, you know, to all the little nuances that a person has. So you totally live in their world while you're writing it. And I think and that's what I say to you about some of the books that are a struggle, they're the ones that, you know, probably aren't working out quite as well, because you're not as in their world as you probably need to be.
I guess you're not looking forward to going into that world, into that space each time you write. Whereas a book that you do like, you actually enjoy going into this world because you don't know what's going to happen, and you're like, I wonder what's going to happen today, and it's kind of curiosity.
Like I'd be writing sometimes, go, no, she's, you know. So that's kind of exciting to make it up. But I think not all books are going to be easy to write, especially if you're contracted to write that. You know, you literally have to deliver, and they're the hard ones, and they're the ones where, you know, you just, you're sitting down and you really are pushing yourself. Whereas, you know, the easy ones, you can't wait, or, you know, you'll, like, how I know if it's going really well is I always email to myself what I've been sort of working on, in case, you know, whatever happens to the manuscript. But you'll find yourself just logging on to your email on your phone and reading it and really enjoying it, you know, and that's when you kind of know it's going well for you, when you want to read it back so early on. And, you know, I edit as I go as well. So I'll, like, those chapters, they do become your Bible. They grow and they grow, and you go back and read them, and you nurture them, and you change things, and that, I think, just takes the overwhelmingness of 100,000 words out of the equation.
Yeah. Right. Were you ever weirded out by the book taking on a life of its own? As in, it's kind of like, in some respects, a stream of consciousness coming through you, where you're writing what's happening. Were you ever at any stage weirded out by that happening?
No, I suppose not. I don't know. I think you always step back and just sort of hope that you're writing interesting things, you know. So I think you can dissociate yourself in that way, and not, like, for example, just say The Week I Ruined My Life, when I had written this very violent scene where, you know, Ali's away in this hotel room and her husband comes banging in. But, you know, you're sort of writing, going, do good Jesus, you know. But you know, it's you know, that's the thing. You're very
There's
distant.
a space there. You're distant.
Yeah. There's definitely space there, and, you know, there's times also that you go, I'll take that out, because, you know, people are going to read this, and I think that's when you have to draw the line and go, no, that isn't you. You know, you must give what you want to give, you know. And obviously there's certain scenes, you're right, that you think, my mother's going to read that, or, you know, someone else is going to read it, and it stops a lot of writers from being from the truth of the character, I suppose. And you try and they're afraid of who's going to read it or what people are going to think about what they've written, but I think you have to write a book and in your head just think, no one's ever going to read this. This is my story. No one's ever going to read it. It'll be in a drawer, because if you worry about everybody who's going to read your work, you'll never be truthful.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, do you have any practice around unfiltered writing that you work on to get you into that way of writing, that you're not filtering yourself like that?
No, not really. I suppose I just want the character to be truthful. And I kind of think of a reader identifying with the character or enjoying the character and trying to be as truthful as I can be, So, I always think of it as like a friend telling you a secret, telling you everything and you taking it in. That's the way I kind of feel the reader is, that I'm telling the reader all these secrets. I don't want them to go and tell anybody else, but that's kind of how you have to perceive it, I suppose.
Or do you find yourself kind of asking your characters questions and then they come out with what they're going to say?
Yeah, totally. I mean, if you, especially, I love to write dialogue, and I write lots of dialogue rather than just setting scenes. But, a lot of the time in the dialogue I write, they're conversations I've had or I've heard or I've, someone else has told me about. So there's a lot of truth in the dialogue. And a lot of time I am asking questions and the character, will answer. And I'm like, right. Yeah, I didn't even know that was what I had in my head as the answer. Yeah. Of course. Yeah. If you question, like, any questions that characters ask in the novel is coming from your own psyche somewhere.
Yeah.
As the writer,
That's good. Yeah, I think that's it for today, Carol. I know it was a great conversation. Enjoyed picking your brain about writing.
Listen.
Are you so prolific, I guess, in writing so many novels?
I don't know about that. Alcoholic, maybe.
Whatever way it's working for you now, whatever it is. But,
it's great. Obviously it's like I say, it's a privilege to be able to be a published author. So that's always good.
Yeah. Is there or if people wanted to find your work, where's the best place to find you online?
Online, I've actually recently given up the Twitter. It's been the best thing ever. Oh my God. I did not realize what a cesspit it was. But I'm on Instagram, which is a nice place to be, at Caroline Grace Cassidy. And I'm on Facebook at author Caroline Grace Cassidy. So they're all the time. And
a lot of people actually go off Twitter though. It's one of the platforms I've never really gone on. But is it because it's so condensed, the format, like, or what's
So yeah, I mean, it is good for, there's a good writing community on it, I suppose, and the sort of the hashtags are sort of interesting, but it's just such a negative space, it's completely different to Instagram, which is, people are supporting each other, and it just seems to be so much hatred on it. Anger and shouting, and everyone's just, because you can talk so fast, and you're speaking so fast, you don't really have to think about what you're saying or the consequences of what you're saying, and you just it's just noisy, and like you'll go on Twitter to do something, and next thing you 20 minutes are gone, and your head is just filled with this anxiety, and it's like, so I came off it in December, and you're just like, what was I doing on it? Like, you don't miss it at all. There's nothing to miss. I just think people are addicted to news, fake news, any news, whatever it is. They're afraid of missing out. And then you realize, sort of people, they just post like 40 times a day, and, your coffee and this is what we do. But I think when you step away from it, you just realize, oh, wow, it completely sucks you in.
Yeah, it's like an addictive pull. And even an addiction to outrage as well. And like
that's what it is. It's just the addictive pull, and it's a fear of missing out. It's FOMO, basically. Twitter, you're afraid, and the whole thing about likes, and we're addicted to these endorphins of people liking what we're saying, or how many likes did I get, and like, I mean, I'm as much to blame as anyone. You put up an Insta story and you say, how many people looked at my story? It's human nature to want, people to be interested in you. But I think when it takes over your life, and you're constantly, looking for people, wanting people to see what you're doing all the time, I just think that becomes a bit worrying. I suppose, you know.
Especially if you're not even aware, like I do find as well, it's a fine balance because you're putting work out there that you want to help people, that resonates, and putting work out there that you're proud of. And at some level, you do need to look at the feedback to see, is anybody actually getting this? Is there any bit of momentum going to this at all? Probably doesn't influence the way I'm going to put my work, but at the same time, I want to just know I'm on the right path in terms of other people.
Yeah.
But
what social media do you do?
it's Instagram because we do illustrations for all the podcasts. So I find it a great visual medium for putting up illustrations. And then Facebook, I just put on my personal Facebook page, and that's it. I think Facebook and Instagram.
I mean, you know, I do obviously accept that they are important tools to have, you know, when you're trying to sell books or build your name. But I think there's a certain amount of time that you just need to spend that obviously I wasn't able to control, that I go on to do one thing and I just go, oh, she said, he said, who said, why did he say that? Oh, she said that. Oh, no. And half an hour is gone.
But as a writer, it's detrimental too, because you need depth to what you're writing rather than the surface level thinking that's going to get in your way for a writer.
Yeah, totally.
No, it's difficult. It's a fine line, but one of those challenges to life.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, it is a fine line, and I think you sort of dip in and out, and you know, let people know you're there and that your book is out or whatever else, and then go make a cup of tea. You just don't want news.
And like you're saying, just pay attention to how you're feeling. How does this actually make you feel? Like, are you feeling more anxious now, or what's the actual pull here? Is it an addictive pull or what?
On Instagram, you're like, oh, that was lovely, and it's kind of nice, but you come away from Twitter and you're like, oh, Jesus. You know, I think because people can hide behind so much on Twitter that don't seem to do on Instagram, and it's just meanness, I think, and I just think you just don't need it, you know.
No, not at all. Well, yeah, that's it, Caroline. Thanks for taking your time with today. It was great to chat with you.
Great to chat with you too. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So until next time, have fun and enjoy the process.